The signal arrived without warning, cutting through every frequency humanity used, from civilian networks to deep space relays. It did not ask for attention. It seized it. Dr. Elias Vance was awake when it happened, which later felt like an indictment. He stood alone in Observation Bay 7 at the Helios Array, watching Jupiter's storms coil like living things beneath the glass, when every screen went black at once. Not static. Not failure. Silence, precise and absolute. Then the image resolved. A chamber vast enough to swallow cities. Geometry that offended the eye. A throne grown, not built. Upon it sat a being wrapped in iridescent armor, its surface shifting colors like oil on water. Behind the throne, banners drifted in artificial gravity, each bearing sigils that hurt to focus on for too long. The voice that followed was translated instantly, flawlessly, and with terrifying intimacy. Species designation human. Classification complete. Elias felt his throat tighten. Around him, alarms began to howl, delayed and pointless. I am High Executive Veiler of the Dominion Ascendant. By decree of the Galactic Concordance, your species is henceforth designated a labor caste. Compliance is mandatory. Resistance is extinction. The chamber behind Veiler shifted. The image split, revealing worlds burning in elegant, controlled arcs. Cities folded inward like collapsing lungs. Fleets were erased with mathematical efficiency. This proclamation is not a threat, Veiler continued. It is an announcement. The feed cut. For a moment, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Then everything broke at once. Elias's wrist console chimed with emergency priority codes stacked atop one another. Military channels. Civil defense. The Helios Array's AI, Sagan, spoke in his ear with a steadiness that felt almost cruel. Dr. Vance, all command staff are being recalled. The United Earth Council is invoking Continuity Protocol Aegis. Elias closed his eyes. Aegis. The word carried weight older than most nations. It meant one thing. War. He had spent his life believing in restraint. In careful escalation. In the idea that intelligence could outrun violence. As the chief xenolinguist assigned to first contact contingencies, Elias had argued endlessly that humanity's survival depended on patience, on proving usefulness rather than dominance. Veiler had just erased that argument. Route me to Geneva, Elias said. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. The council chamber was already full when his image resolved above the central dais. Generals in uniform stood beside scientists who had not slept. Diplomats whispered to one another, hands shaking despite years of training. At the center stood Admiral Mara Cade, Supreme Fleet Commander, her posture rigid, her expression carved from iron. Dr. Vance, she said. You heard it. I did, Elias replied. And so did every human with a receiver. Good, Cade said. Then we won't waste time on disbelief. A counselor leaned forward. Executor Veiler claims legal authority under something called the Galactic Concordance. Is there any chance this is a misunderstanding? A mistranslation? Elias shook his head. No. The language was exact. Deliberately so. They didn't declare war. They declared ownership. A murmur rippled through the chamber, low and furious. Admiral Cade's gaze never wavered. Options. The room stilled. A general spoke first. We fortify. Evacuate off-world colonies. Prepare for orbital denial. Another voice followed. We open negotiations. Buy time. Elias listened, heart pounding, as familiar strategies unfurled like old maps in a new world. None of them fit. They don't want concessions, he said finally. All eyes turned to him. They didn't contact us to negotiate borders or resources, Elias continued. They broadcasted a legal status change. In their framework, we are already defeated. Slaves don't bargain. Silence fell again, heavier this time. Admiral Cade folded her arms. Then what do you suggest, Doctor? Elias hesitated. Every instinct he had screamed against what he was about to say. But the images of burning worlds would not leave him. "We show them they made an error," he said. "Not morally. Strategically." A counselor scoffed. "With what?" "They erased entire civilizations in minutes." "Yes," Elias said. "Which means they believe overwhelming force is enough. That belief is a weakness." Cade's eyes sharpened. "Explain." "They operate on hierarchy," Elias said. "Executor. Concordance. Legal decrees enforced by annihilation. That tells me they don't expect asymmetric retaliation. They crush, they move on. No prolonged resistance." A faint smile touched Cade's lips, thin and dangerous. "And humans," she said quietly, "excel at prolonged resistance." The chamber seemed to lean toward her. "We don't win by matching their fleets," Cade continued. "We win by refusing their script." She tapped the console. A star map blossomed into view, threaded with human markers and something darker beyond. "Continuity Protocol Aegis authorizes actions humanity has never taken," she said. "Black research. Unrestricted deployment. No more pretending we are small." Elias swallowed. "There are technologies we sealed away for a reason." Cade looked at him then, really looked. "Because we were afraid of ourselves." She straightened. "Vaylor thinks we are labor," she said. "We will educate him." Hours later, Elias stood alone again, this time in a sealed chamber beneath the Alps. Before him hovered a construct of impossible density, contained within layered magnetic fields. The Chronos engine. A device that bent causality just enough to make probability kneel. "You always said this thing would end civilizations," Cade's voice echoed through the chamber. "I said it would change them," Elias replied. "There's a difference." She was silent for a moment. "Vaylor ended civilizations today." Elias watched the engine pulse, slow and steady, like a waiting heart. "Then," he said softly, "we respond in a language they understand." Far across the stars, Executor Vaylor sat upon his throne, confident in the inevitability of compliance. He did not yet know that Earth had stopped asking whether it should survive. Only how. The first human strike did not look like war. No fleets crossed borders. No planets burned. No declarations followed the proclamation. For 3 standard cycles after Vaylor's broadcast, the Dominion ascendants saw nothing at all. That unsettled them. Executor Vaylor stood within the obsidian hall, watching data streams ripple across the air like nervous water. Reports arrived from the outer trade corridors. Shipping delays. Relay gaps. Entire sectors falling quiet without signs of battle. "Clarify," Vaylor ordered. The archivist cast master bowed, metallic tendrils twitching. "Supply convoys entering Sol-adjacent regions are failing to return. No debris fields detected. No hostile signatures recorded." Vaylor's mandibles tightened. "Then they are hiding. Or being erased," another executor suggested, unease slipping into his tone. Vaylor dismissed the notion with a gesture. "Humans lack the capacity. Their species was evaluated." That word lingered in the hall, suddenly fragile. Elias Vance watched the same regions through a very different lens. "Phase 1 complete," Admiral Cade said, standing beside him in the darkened command vault. "No shots fired. No casualties confirmed." Elias did not smile. "They noticed." "Good." Holographic projections hovered between them. Dominion supply routes, layered with invisible threads that represented human interference. "Not weapons. Not yet. Algorithms. They rely on predictive logistics," Elias said. "Their fleets move because their models say they can. We fed those models lies." Cade crossed her arms. "You're certain they won't adapt?" "They will," Elias replied. "But adaptation takes time. And fear speeds mistakes." A junior officer approached, eyes wide. "Ma'am. Deep space telemetry from Relay Theta." Cade nodded. "Show us." The image resolved into static, then sharpened into something impossible. A Dominion patrol cruiser, intact, drifting. Its crew frozen in place, not dead, not alive. Time stopped like insects in amber. Elias exhaled slowly. You activated Kronos, Cade said. Only partially, Elias answered. Localized dilation. Enough to prove a point. Cade studied the image. We said no irreversible actions. This isn't irreversible, Elias said. It's demonstrative. The officer hesitated. There's more. A signal is broadcasting from the cruiser. Vaylor's voice filled the chamber, distorted, slowed, each syllable stretched into something monstrous. Error, causality breach. Elias closed his eyes. They felt it. The response came faster than expected. Dominion warforms entered the soul periphery without warning, emerging from folds in space that ignored known physics. They did not announce themselves. They did not threaten. They began harvesting. Asteroid belts were stripped in seconds. Automated mining drones vanished. Human colonies watched their skies darken as alien constructs rewrote gravity itself. Panic rippled outward. In Geneva, the council fractured. This is retaliation, a counselor shouted. You provoked them. Kate slammed her hand onto the table. They declared us property. Elias stood, cutting through the noise. This is escalation by doctrine. They don't believe we can respond proportionally. So they're applying pressure until we collapse. And can we? Someone asked. Elias met their gaze. Yes. But the cost rises. Silence fell again. Kate spoke softly. Proceed to Phase 2. Phase 2 had a name humanity never spoke aloud. Project Ashfall. Elias stood at the observation platform as the device was armed. Not Kronos this time. Something older in concept, born from humanity's darkest simulations. A weaponized stellar resonance engine. You're sure? Kate asked. No, Elias said honestly. But certainty is a luxury we lost. The target was not a planet. Not a fleet. It was a symbol. The Dominion's foundry world Calyrex Prime. The industrial heart that birthed their war machines. Billions lived there. Trillions depended on it. Non-combatants, Cade said quietly. They enslave entire species, Elias replied. And they won't stop. The engine fired. From light years away, Calyrix's star shuddered. Not exploding. Not collapsing. Simply shifting. Its fusion balance destabilized just enough. Within hours, the planet's skies turned white-hot. Oceans boiled. Cities vanished without flame, reduced to ionized memory. Humanity did not cheer. They watched in stunned silence. Vaylor felt it happen. The psychic backlash tore through the obsidian hall, throwing executors from their thrones. Alarms screamed in frequencies meant only for the ruling caste. Calyrex Prime is lost, an aide cried. Star failure. No prior indicators. Vaylor rose slowly, armor flickering with unstable light. That system was secure, he said. Impossible. The aide trembled. The humans did not attack the planet. They altered the star. Vaylor stared at the projection, at the absence where certainty once lived. They are not labor, he whispered. Fear, long forgotten, stirred within him. Elias watched the after-action report alone. Casualty estimates? He asked. Sagan replied, voice steady. Civilian loss probability exceeds acceptable ethical thresholds by human standards. I know, Elias said. You authorized the action. I did. There was no justification that eased the weight. Only necessity. Cade entered quietly. Dominion fleets are withdrawing from Sol space. Elias nodded. They're reassessing. She studied him. You crossed the line today. So did they, Elias replied. First. Cade placed a hand on the glass. This war won't end cleanly. Elias looked out at the stars, at the quiet that followed devastation. It never does, he said. But it ends. Far beyond human reach, Vaylor began rewriting the concordance. For the first time in millennia, The Dominion did not ask how to conquer a species. They asked how to survive one. The summons came encoded in Dominion protocol, translated by human systems with clinical precision. A parley. Neutral space. No weapons larger than a frigate. No temporal distortions. No stellar manipulation. Elias Vance read the message twice before exhaling. "They're afraid," he said. Admiral Maracade stood beside him on the bridge of the Resolve, watching the stars stretch as the ship decelerated. They should be. The meeting point was an artificial void, a bubble carved from subspace and held together by technologies both sides barely trusted. Dominion vessels hovered at its edge like wounded predators, their once pristine hulls scarred with emergency modifications. Human ships formed a loose arc opposite them, understated, quiet, lethal in ways scanners could not measure. Valor arrived last. The executor's projection filled the chamber, smaller than before, his iridescent armor dulled, its colors muted as if ashamed to shine. His eyes fixed on Elias immediately. "You," Valor said. "You architected this response." Elias did not deny it. "You enslaved us." Valor's mandibles flexed. "By law. By assumption," Elias replied. "You assumed we would break." Silence stretched between them, dense and deliberate. Admiral Cade spoke. "State your terms." Valor inclined his head, a gesture that once commanded terror across galaxies. Now it felt like concession. "The Dominion Ascendant withdraws its claim over human systems. All enforcement actions cease. The Concordance will be amended to recognize humanity as a sovereign power." A murmur rippled through the human command staff. "And?" Cade asked. "And," Valor continued, voice tightening, "the technologies you deployed must be surrendered. Kronos-class manipulation. Stellar resonance weapons. Such capabilities destabilize the balance of civilization." Elias laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You mean they destabilize your monopoly on extinction?" Valor's gaze hardened. "You have demonstrated strength. Enough to be respected. Further escalation risks annihilation on a scale neither of us can contain." "That," Elias said, "is the first honest thing you've said." Cade leaned forward. "Here are our terms." The projection shifted as human data flooded the void. Records of enslaved species. Genetic harvests. Cultural erasures logged as administrative efficiency. "The Dominion dismantles the labor caste system," Cade said. "All subjugated species are granted autonomy. Reparations will be negotiated. Enforcement mechanisms will be monitored by joint oversight." Valor recoiled as if struck. "That would unravel the Dominion." "Yes," Elias said quietly. "It will. You ask us to destroy ourselves?" "No," Elias replied. "We ask you to stop destroying others." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of centuries ending. Valor's voice dropped. "If we refuse?" Elias met his eyes. "Then we teach your empire the rest of our language." The Accord of Ashes was signed 3 hours later. Across known space, Dominion fleets stood down. Shock collars deactivated. Labor worlds went dark as control systems failed, then bright again with something unfamiliar. Choice. Celebrations erupted on Earth, restrained, exhausted, edged with grief. Humanity had survived. But survival carried a cost that no victory speech could erase. Elias did not attend the ceremonies. He stood instead in the Kronos chamber, watching engineers begin the long process of dismantlement. Each component removed felt like a confession. "You won," Sagan said. Elias shook his head. "We endured." Cade entered quietly. "The Council wants you. They'll manage." She studied him. "History will call you many things. History doesn't have to live with the consequences," Elias replied. Cade hesitated. "Would you do it again?" Elias looked at the engine, at the device that had bent fate and broken civilizations. "I would choose differently," he said. "But I would choose humanity." She nodded once and left him alone. Valor watched the dismantling of the obsidian hall from exile. The Dominion Ascendant no longer existed. In its place rose something fragile and unfinished, stitched together from former subjects who remembered paying too well to trust easily. An aide approached. The human's request continued dialogue. Vaylor considered the stars, brighter now without the weight of conquest distorting them. They do not request, he said. They invite. The aide tilted its head. Will you accept? Vaylor closed his eyes. We must learn what they are. Years later, children on Earth would learn about the proclamation as a turning point, a moment when humanity refused its assigned role. They would argue whether the response had been justified, whether the price had been too high. Elias Vance would never attend those debates. He left Earth quietly, joining a deep space mission tasked not with defense, but with listening. With first contact done the human way. Slowly. Carefully. Without thrones or decrees. As the ship slipped into the dark between stars, Elias allowed himself one final thought. Humanity had been declared slaves. They had answered as architects of consequence. And the galaxy would never again mistake silence for submission.